Next session of the admissions and registrar, new directors onboarding, process. To give some context to our counselor, we have with us today Ms. Tawanda Artist. She's our general counsel. I call her Dr. Artist. Hey, she has a Juris Doctorate. So she's our general counsel for the Community College System Office. She has graciously agreed to provide a session and overview with you of the difference between state board code and local policy. That's something I think that as a system, we sometimes struggle with, and Elaine, you can attest to, sometimes we don't. How do we set our local policy, and how do we measure it up against our state board code? And then sometimes we create policies on our campuses that really aren't tied to state board code, but because they've been in place for so long and we inherit them, we think they are rooted in law, and sometimes they're not. And so our general counsel was gracious enough to come and talk with you today about this. Counselor, just give you a context. This is a group of professionals who have been in their role generally from a year or less. They've probably been in their field for a while, but in the role they're in now, they've been in probably for less than a year. And so even though they know policy and they know code and they know process, sometimes it has not been in a leadership role. And so they may not have touched it as frequently as the former directors or registrars at their campus. And so that's what this group is. And so we want to get them onboarding some kind of context to the different stages of their position. And that's what this is.
That sounds good, Dr. Hickman.
Right. And so I will hand this over to you. Let's set some rules first. One, please, if you're going to have a conversation with your colleagues or answer the phone, please put yourself on mute because we don't want to hear background noise. Also, if you get a call, please do not put us on hold because we can hear the background music. Also, are they allowed to ask questions up front, or would you prefer to wait to the end?
They can stop me at any time.
Okay, so the rules have been set. With that being said, I will lead it over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Hickman. I recall in our conversation you talked about how folks in this role were fairly new. And I just opened the slide presentation and lost my screen of you all. So give me one moment to share that.
There you go.
And hopefully I won't lose you all. All right. So Dr. Hickman and I talked about an issue that we have sometimes where at the colleges, I get questions from folks who say, but this is state board code, but it's actually not. Or I know this is a policy, but maybe it's not. And so we thought it would be useful while you are learning in your new role to talk a little bit about the system structure, our shared governance system between the state and local boards, and give you some of the distinctions in state law versus state board code versus your local campus policies. So let's keep going. I actually want, I'm sorry, every time I click, are you seeing I feel like I need to switch my screens, Dr. Hickman.
I see the overview and then I see the slide that's coming up next. That's what I was saying before.
I'm going to share again because I need to switch the screens.
Okay.
Because the way they're coming up, you're seeing my notes screen.
I'm seeing, yes. I was seeing a note screen before.
Okay, let's try this again. How's that?
There you go.
Okay. All righty. So let's jump right in. This is our overview of what we're going to talk about today. Again, feel free to stop me at any point that you have questions. I know some of you may have been in the system for a while, but I thought it would be good to start with what our community college family looks like. We have had at times as many as 700,000 students. Right now, we're sitting at about 525,000 across the system, with 58 colleges, 58 presidents, over 700 trustees. At the system office, we are budgeted for 230 employees. We're probably staffed around 195 right now. And at the state board level, there are 22 board members. 21 of the 22 have voting rights. The only state board member that does not have a vote is the student government member who represents N4CSGA. So I think this is a good umbrella way to start by talking about the state constitution as the ultimate authority that established our system, then the General Assembly and other state statutes that have contributed to our system, the State Board Code, which authorizes and limits the work on some of the college campuses. One thing that I hear a lot is people say, but State Board Code is not law. It has the same full force and effect as law. As an administrative code is considered administrative rules, which could be enforced in a court of law. And then finally, your College Board of Trustees and the college policies that are led by your president and approved by the Board of Trustees. So our state constitution in Article 9, Section 8 talks about the General Assembly maintaining a public system of higher education, should be composed of such other institutions of higher education as they deem wise. It shall provide a process for selection of trustees, and they may enact laws necessary and expedient for the maintenance and management of the system. Probably the most relevant provision of this section, of Section 9, is the mandate for free or very low cost education for people of the state, which we know is borne mostly by the community college system, not so much by our university friends. So here's a short history of the system. In 1957, the Community College Act passed. This was the first piece of legislation that supported community colleges and placed them under the State Board of Education. In 1963, the General Assembly created the community college system as a standalone department, but still kept it under the State Board of Education. In 1980 is when the State Board of Community Colleges was created, and the community college system became a standalone entity, no longer under the Department of Education. So you can see, really, we've only been on our own for about 40 years now. So there's a lot we've learned in 40 years, but there's more we can learn. So let's jump into some of the general statutes that I think are important for you to remember and be able to reference and go back to as you have questions about things. Chapter 115D governs the community college system. Section 1 talks about the statement of purpose, provides for the establishment, organization, and administration of the system, that we are to offer courses of instruction in general areas of 2-year college parallel, technical, vocational, and adult education programs, that we serve as the legislative charter for institutions, and that the state can authorize local taxes or issue bonds to support the system. 115D 2.2 is the provision in state law that creates the State Board of Community Colleges. I won't talk a lot about that because it's not entirely relevant for our dialogue today. And then 115D3 is the statute that creates the Community College System Office and talks about and makes the system office a principal administrative department of state government. So at the system office, we are considered a state agency in the same way that the Department of Transportation or Department of Labor are state agencies bound by state law and regulated by the legislature. 115D4 talks about the establishment of colleges. A bit of history, 1979, Brunswick Community College was the last new college added to the system. So we've been at 58 colleges for a pretty long time. And then in 1999, Southern Piedmont or South Piedmont was established by joining Anson Community College with the Union Technical Education center. Here's a quick map of the service areas that colleges tend to cover. You'll see that we cover almost the entire state. And usually these service areas go by whole counties, but 3 colleges are split across a few counties. And so you can see kind of what the breakdown of our college service areas looks like. 115D5 provides for the administration of institutions by the state board. It basically gives the State Board of Community Colleges the authority to adopt and execute such policies, regulations, and standards concerning the establishment, administration, and operations of the colleges as the State Board may deem necessary. Their purposes are to focus on ensuring the quality of educational programs, promoting the systematic meeting with educational needs across the state, and providing for the equitable distribution of state and federal funds. I think sometimes because we have this shared governance system where the state board has some authority and responsibilities, and then your local board has some authority and responsibilities, it can get confusing about who has the authority for what. So I wanted to give you a slide that talked a little bit about state boards authority areas versus local board authority areas. So here we have that for the most part, the state board oversees the college budgets, capital improvement projects, the hiring of college presidents. They establish and administer standards related to professional personnel, curricula, admissions, and graduation. They establish and regulate financial accounting procedures, and they establish and regulate tuition waivers. Just a reminder, full force and effect of law. It is administrative rules related to those areas of authority I just told you about. And the state board code governs our rulemaking process, which rulemaking is the process by which state agencies create their administrative rules. For the most part, most state agencies are under what we call the North Carolina Administrative Code, and they go through a different state agency to make their rules. Because that can be pretty time intensive, and it could in some cases take 3 to 6 months to approve new rules. Around 2015, our state board decided that was too long. They wanted control of their own rules, and they sought permission from the state to create the state board code and to regulate it. But that is why it is a body of laws, just like any other administrative rule. And one of my jobs or responsibilities as the general counsel for the system is to oversee that process and become what's known as the codifier of rules, making sure that our rules are consistent and that they integrate well when we adopt new rules. All right, so let's move on. Composition of state board. There are 18 appointees on the state board, 10 from the governor, 4 from the House of Representatives, and 4 from the Senate. And each of those 3 appointing authorities has their own process for how they select their appointees. The governor pretty much selects who he wants to appoint, whereas the House and Senate have names submitted, and then they vote, and the highest vote getters become the appointees. And then there are 3 ex officio members of the state board, and that just means they are a member by virtue of their position in the state. So that is our lieutenant governor, our state treasurer, and our commissioner of labor. So as they will rotate off the state board whenever they lose their seat in those positions. And then, of course, the president of the N4CSGA. Just like many of your local boards, we value having a student on the state board. But that person is non-voting. We have been fortunate in the couple of years I've been here to have very active and engaged student members. So the state board is mandated to meet 10 times a year. We normally meet at the system office in the Caswell building. The state board has its own boardroom here. And at least once a year, many times twice a year, the state board will meet at a college. This month, at the end of this week, our meeting will be at in Shelby at Cleveland Community College. And then in the spring, we'll choose another college. And this is designed to bring the state board members in a rotation to a number of colleges. So they get to see kind of what you get to see day to day and really understand and appreciate the value of what you all are doing as our boots on the ground on the college campuses. Committee meetings are normally held on the third Thursday of the month, with a full board meeting following on Friday. Open meetings law and public records law apply to these meetings. We won't go into a lot of detail about that. Unless you have questions, you can stop me. But I want to move into talking about local boards. So 115D14 sets forth the requirements for local boards of trustees. They must be a body corporate. They may acquire, hold, and transfer real and personal property. They may enter contracts. They may institute and defend legal actions and lawsuits. And they exercise other rights and privileges as may be necessary for the management and administration of the college. So pretty wide latitude for your local board of trustees. And this is what we mean when we say shared governance. So while the state board is working on the areas of authority I showed you earlier, the local boards are focused on these areas. 115D12 provides that each institution must have a board of trustees. Your institution cannot operate without a board of trustees. As well, in state board code, there's a requirement in 1B 300.1 that you must have a board of trustees. The composition of your board of trustees is normally 4 appointed by the local board of education, 4 appointed by the county commissioners, and 4 appointed by the governor. Again, each of those appointing authority has their own process for how they select their appointees. And then normally the president of your SGA is also a non-voting member on your local board. Local boards are really important because of the oversight they provide to your campuses. And most of the time, we think of boards as having one employee, which is the president. So for the local board, your college president would be there, one employee, but then the college president oversees everything else on the campus. And the same is true at the state board level. The one employee that the state board tends to oversee is the system president. Some approval rights for other senior team members and some shared oversight, but most of their control is operated through the president of your college. So I wanted to give you this chart to kind of show you the structure of how we should think about systems of authority. There's a state board, the system president, the local board of trustees, and again, the campus presidents. This slide talks about some of the trustees' roles and responsibilities. It comes from their national association. No need for us to go over this. I just want to point out 2 things that under SET, it talks about setting the policy direction and establishing policies that provide direction and guidance to the president and the staff of colleges, defining and upholding the mission and vision that clearly reflects student and community expectations. And then also under define policy standards for college operations. Once policy standards are established, they must allow the president and staff flexibility to exercise professional judgment. So I'll keep going and then I want to make some distinctions for you there, but we'll come back to it in a moment. So again, we talked about chapter 115D being the state statutes that control the entire community college system. Article 2 of that chapter is devoted to local boards of community college and community college operations themselves. And so most of your policy subject areas will be born out of either Article 2 or other policies created by your local board. Some standard policy areas are academic affairs, administration, business and finance, public or college relations, educational support services, employment, facilities, maintenance, faculty and staff, information technology, institutional effectiveness, program development, student services, and standard forms. And a lot of the policy making and policy maintaining functions for colleges live under your Office of Institutional Effectiveness. At the system office, I just want to remind you that we are an administrative department of state government. We're led by the system president. The system office administers the policies adopted by the state board. We manage and comply with the directives in state law. And most importantly, we are here to serve you. And so we want to make sure that we are always responsive to the needs of our community college family members. I tell people all the time, I am happy to help in any way I can, provide you what guidance I can. I just want everyone on the campuses to remember that there are 58 of y'all. And I also have 22 state board members and a system president who I represent. And so the state board and the president and the agency itself are my highest priorities. But I love to help you all when I can. Just understand that it may take me a little bit of time to build you into my schedule. So on this slide, I have my contact information. Feel free to write it down. Send me an email, call me when you have questions. My paralegal's name is Halima Sharif. Anytime I'm out of the office, Halima knows my schedule. She knows when I'll be back. She can give you timelines, or if there's an emergency situation and you need something immediately, Halima knows how to contact me. So I'll leave that up for a moment and allow you to write that down. And I'll go back and highlight one thing that I wanted to draw a distinction for you. I think it's important when we talk about state law that you understand that law can be made in a number of different ways. What I've talked to you about with Chapter 115D of the General Statutes is written law, really starts as legislation. In our state legislature, once it's approved, it's called session laws. And once it's codified, it's called part of the general statutes. But there's also case law in our state. That happens when some action is challenged at the appellate court level. And the appellate court judges, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court of our state being our highest courts of review, then come out with an opinion that changes something. And that can become law as well. I'll give you a very high profile example. Not that I want to engage in any political commentary with you about what's right or wrong, but the most well-known example I can give you right now that's happening in real time is the recent change to abortion laws at the federal level. So at the federal level, just like the state level, they have courts of appeal, and then they have the Supreme Court as the highest authority. So when the Supreme Court issued its ruling a couple of months ago, permitting states to outlaw abortion, it changed the law completely. So even though that is not written in a federal statute or the Code of Federal Regulations anywhere, it is still a law that the entire country is bound by. So I want to make that distinction that there are really two areas we see law in, not just the state statutes that I talked to you about. You will probably need an attorney to research the case law for you. So if your campus doesn't have a general counsel or someone on retainer, let us know. We do offer research to the campuses as a function we can try to do for you. Again, you just have to be patient with us because we will not be able to give you an answer quickly, but I will always make sure we circle back and get you an answer. As well, Dr. Hickman will tell you, I don't mind being reminded because my email box is usually on fire every day. It's all day, nonstop. And then I travel a good bit in my position. So as soon as we finish up this morning, I'm going to get on the road to Pinehurst to go to Sand Hills Community College. And then tomorrow through Friday, I'll be in Shelby at Cleveland. And so, again, you might not be able to get me quickly, but Halima can find me if you need me, and I will always get back to you. I want to take some time to show you a couple of other things that are resources online for you that I want to make sure you're aware of and that you utilize. I'm going to, let's see if I can break this page out without having to Yeah, give you my whole. So I'm a window open person, so I have 5,000 windows open on my internet browser right now. Pay that no mind, okay? And I back out of here so that I can show you exactly where we're going to go. So if you've never looked at State Board Code and you want to know something like the question that was asked at the beginning of our meeting about what State Board Code requires, the full State Board Code is listed on the system's website. So you just click to go to State Board of Community Colleges Code. For some reason, it opens open like this. I don't like it like that. So I always click the top link to get the table of contents. And most of the time where you all will probably need will be in one, let's see, 1G, 1D, 1G. Let's see. Yeah, so 1D, 1G, and maybe even some in 1H. But I'd encourage you just to familiarize yourself with this. Scroll through sometime and just take a look at the areas that you know impact your campus, like the FTE calculation. So that's how you find State Board Code for anyone who did not know. I want to show you one other thing with State Board Code. Let's just enter a random one. It doesn't matter which one. So this part is what I mean when I say the law and the full effect and force of law. What's important here is also this history note, because it ties in what general statutes apply and what general statutes give authority for this provision in the State Board Code. It talks about when it was first effective, 1993. So this became effective under the North Carolina Administrative Code and was brought over to our State Board Code in 2015. Here we also give you when code provisions were changed. All of these should be hyperlinked. Apologies, so we'll make sure we go back and get these hyperlinked. But they hyperlink and go back to the numbered memo from when this change was made that explains the change for you. So if you ever have any question about what a State Board Code provision means, I would suggest clicking those provisions at the bottom so you can see what the explanation was given in the numbered memo. As well, if you have something where you say, well, I thought the rule was this, but I'm looking at State Board Code now and it says this, it may mean that there was a code revision that you're not aware of. So clicking those links for when the code was amended will also help you find when that change might have been made and what impact it might have to your system. I also want to go over and show you how to find general statutes, because I just showed you where the general statutes and the authority for items in the State Board Code are shown. So let's say we had 115D5 in the provision I just showed you, and you want to trace it back and say, okay, well, the State Board Code it's okay, but I want to know, what does the underlying law say? So you'll go to the General Assembly's website, which is here, ncleg.gov. And then once you're here, you'll click on Bills and Laws, General Statutes. And you could keyword search really any chapter. If you come here, I suggest going to 115D, as that will be where all of our statutory laws are. And you could just put in anything. So here's one that I've searched before, College Area Service Report. Okay, so we get nothing there. So let's try another one. Let's do one that I know is there. Let's say you have a question about customized training. You can literally search and find what the rules are for customized training, or what the laws are related to customized training, without having to know your exact citation, right? So I want to go back out, because if you're looking at State Board Code, you will have citations. So if you have the citation, I suggest going here to the table of contents for the general statutes. Scrolling down to 115D. And then we were looking for 115D5. So this is your citation. If I click here, it'll go to the page. This is what we call the short title from my time at the legislature. We call it the short title, but as you can see, this one is a pretty long title, but it's just designed to tell you what that particular statute is about. And then this is one of my favorite parts. It tells you when it was last modified and by what bill. So since this was 2021, I'm fairly certain it's been integrated here. If we look at something like this, 2022-69, it may not have been integrated and updated here. So these are important if you're trying to make sure you know what the most recent changes were. So let's just look at this one. And so then you get the full text of the general statute. And so there's probably more information than you ever want to know. But if you're curious and you do want to know and trace it back, that's how you do it. And then I'll click on this session law so that you see. So this opens to the session law page where basically this is the whole legislative process. These are votes that were taken to get this law to pass. These are all the steps it went through in the legislative process. For your purposes, the most important thing you'll want is the session law number, 2022-69. And the session law number is a random, well, it's not a random number, it's a sequential number assigned to session laws by the legislature as they are passing them. And so this one talks about all of the relevant changes. Most importantly, it was approved on July 8th, 2022. So if you're concerned that this may not be in the general statutes yet, you would want to know when the general statutes were last updated and compare it to this date to make sure you're looking at the most recent changes. All right, I'm pausing. You guys are a quiet bunch. So I want to make sure if you have any questions, I can answer them. My, oh my, I'm not sure I've ever had a group this quiet.
Please don't be shy.
Dr. Hickman, can you think of anything I didn't cover that they might need to know?
You covered everything from the state board code. I've learned some stuff myself today on that. So to the question earlier about the for example, the term periods. I think some people went out on when we had that conversation. So anytime they want to change anything or want something changed in the state board code, they will probably have to come through the system office, correct?
Correct. So I think of it kind of in this way. We kind of own the state board code process in the system office because the authority to change code provisions lies with the state board. So if you ever wanted to change something in the state board code, you feel like this just doesn't make sense for how we do things on the campuses. It's not practical. It's not the steps that we use. It's outdated for some reason. Then what you'll do is alert me and tell me, okay, I think this needs to be changed and here's why. Someone at the system office will need to file the petition for rulemaking. For you all, most likely it would be Dr. Hickman or maybe Dr. Brown if Dr. Hickman so desires. They bring me that petition for rulemaking and say, this is what we want to change. This is why we want to change it. And I would then take that document with a draft of the changes to the system president, ask them to sign off. If they sign off, then we'll start the rulemaking process. I want to show you.
And can I ask you a question? I'm looking at this definitions things too, and it says
Yes.
academic term reporting period. The calendar year is divided into 3 academic terms, reporting periods, and are defined as follows. So, and that is language. So, and that's reporting period. Is that not to say that a college couldn't register a student prior to that date, or classes need to start within that period? That's a period.
So the law is often gray. I say there's never black and white, it's subtle shades of gray. And I think what you're picking up on, Dr. Hickman, is one of those gray places, right? Because the college could start on August 14th, but they wouldn't be able to report numbers from August 14th, is basically what it's saying.
Yeah.
And that may be okay if you're starting on the front end, because your census date will always be further in, right? And that's where your most important numbers are going to come from anyway, is once you pass that census date. So I cannot give you authority to do that, but I can say that that is a subtle shade of gray.
Yeah, but it's a shade of gray.
One other thing I wanted to show you, I want to show you what a state board code report looks like, because I think it gives you a good idea of how long the rulemaking process can be. Okay, so here's one from August. So this was HyFlex when we were going through the rulemaking process for HyFlex. And this is something that the state board gets every month, that we are in the rulemaking process for something. So this, we know, was the HyFlex definition. We actually started the rulemaking process for this in January. We posted it on the website January 25th for public comment. There's a 30-day public comment period where literally anyone from anywhere can post a public comment to tell us this is good, this is bad, I don't like it, I do like it, for whatever reason. And then those written comments are presented back to the state board at the end of that 30-day period at the next meeting. So February 23rd was already after. Was the end of the 30-day period and after the February board meeting. So we had to wait till March to bring it to the state board. We will review the comments. If the department most impacted at the system office has any responses to the comments, they'll present those as well. And if there are no changes, we can move forward to adoption of the provision. If there are any changes, which sometimes there are, because when things go out for that 30-day period, what we find is sometimes our folks at the colleges, again, find things that we didn't know. We're not practical at the system office because we're not doing the action every day. And so they'll come back and say, well, this doesn't make sense because of X, Y, Z. Or there's an additional step that you forgot that we need to put in. And so when that happens, we have to make the changes, take them to the state board with the public comments. So that would be that March board meeting. But then we have to allow an additional 5-day public comment period in case there are comments on what we changed. At the end of that period, then we normally move to adoption. This was a special case because HyFlex was pretty high touch with some of the presidents. And so they wanted more time to review it, to meet at the North Carolina Association of Community College Presidents on the programs committee level to discuss it and make any changes they wanted. So they asked for, and was granted via motion and approval at the state board level, an extension to July. They came back with their comments at the end of July. They went to the August board meeting. The provision was adopted. This would now say complete for next month. And then the proposed effective date is always September 1st, or I'm sorry, the 1st of the month after it is approved by the state board. So that's just to give you a view of how long the rulemaking process could take. So when you're asking questions about August 15, 2023, if that's a change that you'd like to see, we probably need to start working on it in the next couple of months because it could be a lengthy process. And that is why when the question came up, I said to Elaine and Dr. Hickman, it is much easier if the state board just waives that requirement for you than if we actually go through the rulemaking process, because it can be a substantial process.
Are there times, I know there's a question on here, but are times that, are there times, I'm trying to think of the best way to ask it. Are there times when, without, saying they have to do this, are there times when the state board code can be open to interpretation?
Yes. Yes, and I think it's the subtle shades of gray, right? Um, and what we see is it really depends on where the state board lands on the issue, right? Because if there's a different interpretation at a campus and the state board says, okay, that's fine, then no harm, no foul. But if for some reason there's a different interpretation at campus and a state board member says, no, that's not correct, that's not what we meant, that's not the requirement, then they're going to come in and want to probably make contact with your president and talk about what their expectations were for it. Most of the time, I don't see it causing any problem for a campus unless it comes up in one of your compliance reviews that you're doing something out of conformity with the state board code. So my advice to you, if you're concerned about the interpretation of something in state board code, I would take it to the compliance review team. Amanda Toller is the director of compliance services right now. And so I'd reach out to Amanda and say, hey, Amanda, I'm reading this way. And I believe that, we can do it this way. And Amanda will tell you historically how that's been viewed in the compliance reviews and whether or not you may be dinged for it later. As well, the compliance review team has numerous work papers that explain their processes. And so they may have more information than even what we have in the state board code to help you in your interpretation.
Okay, here's a good question. We have been reviewing our local policies around refunds associated with drops, no-shows, and any transactions after the first day of class. I think this is the confusion for us between what state board requires after the first day and what flexibility we have at the college. Our college is required to charge students for schedule adjustments drops before the census date.
I don't know, Johanna, but what I do know is it's got to be in the state board code. So let's go to 1G because my best guess is it's probably.
I thought I saw refunds due. No, it's definitely student.
Okay, if you see it before I do, or okay, so let's use the technique I just told you to use that I didn't use myself. We can find on the page. And here we are, 1E, refunds. Okay, so let's get through the definitions. We may need to come back to them. And so we're focusing on curriculum, right, Johanna?
Correct.
Let's see, it says this was repealed, so it's got to be replaced with something. I don't know where it was replaced.
Let's see.
Okay, that's really interesting. Because normally when we see language like that that says repealed, it talks about it being codified somewhere else. So let's just make sure I didn't miss it. Tuition and fees for curriculum programs. So let's go to the numbered memo and see what it said about this. So it talks about it being rewritten, but it doesn't. Maybe it's here in this authority to establish tuition and fees. Or actually, what I'll do is go back now and look at the full chapter 1E. Because maybe I'm just in the wrong section. So if you call me with this question, this is real time what I would be doing. So we're going to go to chapter E. I'll probably search here for refund. Oh, look at there, it already populated because it was already there. Okay. So here we are, 900.1 and all the definitions. But it doesn't know. I might need to do some research on this for you. Because the other thing that I'm questioning is if something was not integrated appropriately. And the reason that I think that I'll show you. And this does happen sometimes with state board code. Actually, let me go back to this. And I can probably show you here. So this repeal section, when I went here to this numbered memo, it has the draft of what's supposed to be in state board code now. And I didn't see this provision 200.1 or 200.2. And the fact that it's underlined means it's new text that should have been in that chapter. And so that is why I'm concerned that something isn't integrated properly. Now that I have that citation, let's go back and see if we can find chapter 200. Okay. No. So I think what we've just discovered is a glitch in the state board code where it was not properly updated in 2014 or 2015, whenever this section was last changed. So Johanna, I think I need to do a little bit more research on this. And
So
this
could
is
she
probably
send me an email and I'll forward it to you? That way there's a record of it.
absolutely. And I'm going to loop in Amanda Toller on this as well, because I'm sure compliance probably has a working paper on it. And so we like to see what that says as well. And I can send you whatever the working paper is, Johanna, as well.
Yeah, that's because she just did
Thank you very
a
much.
and she just did a section on the top 10 findings, and so she said she's willing to do another session also. So something like
Wonderful.
that.
Amanda is great. I feel like she's incredibly knowledgeable. And so use her as a resource as well. Other questions?
Well, I'll say this, since I know you may have questions that you don't want to ask on here. This is a safe space. I know it's being recorded, but it's still a safe space. The recording is pretty much for you to have a copy of it. But if you do have questions in the future, email me and I'll forward them to the counselor.
Well, thank you for inviting me today, Dr. Hickman. I always like meeting our family members out on the campuses. And so I'm always happy to have the opportunity to speak to you all.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you, Counselor Artis. We really appreciate this. Great information. Again, like I said, I learned a whole lot. This recording will be sent out to the participants. So again, also participants, if you have any other questions, just email me and I'll make sure they get to Ms. Artis. And like she said, she can't respond right away, but she does respond. She's really great about that. So please don't email something you need today, the day of, because it'll take some time. But thank you all for being on this call today. I will send you the list of the next session once we were able to schedule it. And I appreciate your time and all the work that you do for our students. You did a great job. Thank you. And I'm going to stop the recording now. So if anyone has something they want to say, the recording has now